Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. Andrew, shut the fuck up, you piece of shit. Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride. GG, motherfuckers.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Talk to Thorin. And for this episode, I'm joined by James BanKs, who people might have seen at a number of CSGO events, either interviewing people. Actually, he was the desk host with me at Star Series Season 7 this year, has been doing some other events, also works in PUBG and a bunch of other esports games, and crucially, has a background in Counter-Strike, which is where I know him. So the premise for this interview is people, when they see esports and they consume the media, etc., will know about many of the big names, you know. And the problem with that is, right, if you made a documentary about someone who's, you know, like Anders or something, or Machine or something, yeah, it's going to have those little moments, maybe early on, where they have a few hard times or something's tough, you know. But you know, the end of the story is it goes brilliant. Like in the end, they're Anders and Machine, right? Everything does work out, it all goes great. But what people don't realise, and I can speak to this myself, because as I always tell people, the first decade or so I was in the industry, I wasn't an on-camera person. I wasn't a person who necessarily benefited from all the great things that were happening as much. You know, I had some side benefits at times, or sometimes, you know, my career was going well in some respects, but I went through some of the hard times as well when the industry had its problems and when there just weren't as many opportunities available for someone like me. So what I thought would be interesting is, let's get the take of someone who's absolutely been through all sorts of different things, across multiple different games, many different years. So let's start out, James, right? Can you give people basically, I remember back in CS 1.6, which lasted a long time, obviously it was about over 10 years for that game. You were someone who initially came along, like we all did, you start out as a fan, and then you start to see how we can get involved in the community, you do small things. So, like, can you give us some of the background there? Like, what were the first things you were doing, and how did that start to become not just like something you do on the side because you like Counter-Strike, and actually become something approaching where the industry is now? How would you give us your intro in that sense?
Well, I started playing CS as just a fan. I loved the game. My friends from school from 2003. I found out about the pro scene. You watch the stuff on HLTV, right? You see the games. You aspire to be a pro gamer. But I'm from the UK, and even our best teams like Four Kings, you've heard the stories. You've seen it all before. They were generally lazy players when it came down to it. Our team wasn't as well gifted, as well rounded in that sense. But then basically what I realized was, okay, I can only get so far as a player, at least within Counter-Strike. I competed in other games as well and had a bit more success, like fighting games and then a racing game. I just wanted to be involved in esports. I loved what this was. And basically I only got into it all because I was a diabetic, a type 1. I used to be sporty. As you will learn, the road to diabetes, it's not easy. So my dad got me a PC and I just played tons of games. But the real big breaks for me was like in 2005. It was WNV, the Chinese team. They launched an international website. They were looking for writers. Again, it was volunteers, nothing paid, but it was an opportunity to like get the foot in the door and learn some stuff. And also it's quite interesting because obviously it was to do with a Chinese organization, an area we didn't get to hear or see too much from. So that was really like fun start to just be a normal type of writer, do a couple of like smaller interview stuff, things like that. And then I actually got picked up by NIP when they relaunched, when obviously they left away from SK. And that's how I first came to actually get like a real taste of what doing proper journalism could have been. I was doing like the match reports. I was breaking down the coverage. I was doing interviews with players. We did the, SK had their SK Insider, like from the times me and you were there. But this was, they had like a NIP VIP thing. So we were running with that. And that was kind of my entry into everything esports. And I knew from that point that like, I didn't want to leave this industry. It was so much fun, even when there wasn't money involved. Like you were doing this because it was a pure passion.
In those early days, like, were there many benefits aside from, you know, like you say, the cool part of being a part of a site and, you know, getting to work with players? Were there actual, like, were the material benefits any good back then? Was there any sort of like trajectory that could go anywhere?
Well, like there was no guarantee where it would go. I guess we were all holding on to the pipe dream of like, we can make it this far. And as you know, there was only so many people at the very top, right?
Sure.
And they weren't even that well paid positions. Like some people would have to work 2 or 3 of those smaller jobs to have a somewhat okay salary. Most of my things back then was like you would get headsets from sponsors, or maybe you'd get a trip to go with the team, but they'd pay for the trip, but you weren't actually being paid for it. So you might like, I got to go to the SWCs, for example, and stuff. But I was pretty young then. I'm like, at this point, 15. So like I'm still in school. So for me, this is just like, go to school. I come from a pretty, like, I guess you'd call it like the ghetto area just outside London. It's much better me being on my computer doing this stuff than being out side and dealing with all of that crap. So like for me, this was just my escape from everything, and my attempt at like getting involved and enjoying what I was doing and also learning a bit from it. But yeah, the overall benefits, the things you got from it was not much more than that. And I guess obviously you'll remember it back on the old SK website. It was like, oh, people just appear and like, oh, you work here, and they try and ask you for things. That was about it.
Sure. Even though, as you say, yeah, obviously it's a much better life to just be playing games in whatever capacity than on the literal streets where there can be a tough life. Even so, though, as people will now discover, there's a brutal side to esports that people don't get to find out. So during this time when it was transitioning, like you said, from kind of like a hobby, you know, you get some perks for doing it, you get some benefits, but really at the time, I mean, the industry itself can't really pay many people. A lot of people are just working off passion as a hobby, like you say. When it transitions now, so that in the last 10 years, let's say, when it's become this bigger industry, and so as a result, it needs a lot of people to populate all these different jobs. There's many different things you can do. And the problem is, those jobs themselves now carry, you know, certain price tag as to what you can be paid or promise certain benefits. And as people will realize is, the shadier the company, the less some of those things turn up, the less you actually get what they promised, even though, you know, you might literally be living your life as though you're expecting that paycheck to come, you're expecting this thing they promised. So can you, as we transition to that part of the industry, like what sort of jobs were you taking within the industry when it got to like the bigger world of esports, the last, say, 10 years or so?
So like I took a break for about a year or so when I was in college, not university. I didn't have the money or funding to go do that kind of thing. But basically I'd known Heaton and Spawn from back on the NIP stuff and SK, and they'd come to me, and this is after they'd retired as well. And they said, oh, we're working with this company called Zowie. And obviously that's the manufacturer who makes all the mice, keyboards, mouse pads, that kind of stuff. And this is when the company first started. And they offered me, like, it was a part-time role. I was basically a marketing assistant. I had no qualifications other than knowing esports, and they paid me. It was a pretty good salary for my age, better than if I worked like a McDonald's or something like that. And basically, I would help them with writing the PRs. We'd be testing out products. We'd go to events and stuff like that. And that was probably like my first big shot at it. And they gave me kind of the opportunity to continue to move forward. I think even to this day, like, outside of people, what Zowie did for me was ensure that I could still stay in it, because there was definitely a point back then where I looked at it and thought, well, maybe I'm just going to leave now, because like you said, the money wasn't there for everyone. It wasn't exactly like you could be guaranteed you're going to get money for this or be able to go to multiple events and stuff like that. And especially back then where content relied on, you pretty much had to be at the events, right? You had to get the extra video interviews and stuff like that. That was starting to come in.
So in Counter-Strike, I mean, as you've referenced, these are all companies where you're behind the scenes, or if you're on camera, it's on content on their websites. So one of the areas in Counter-Strike when that game got really big in CSGO that people will have seen you is, well, famously, one of the memes attached to you was did you look at that, right? Because it's when you did that Gfinity where you and Sembler were casting.
I got to explain that as well.
Yeah, I remember actually, I heard the background story to this was actually one I hadn't heard for many years. So it was something to do with the fact that you had diabetes, right?
Yeah, so basically I wasn't supposed to commentate the grand final, right? And then they threw me in it last minute, and I'd never been on a big stage. I'd never done a grand final like that, and it was in front of a live audience. So with diabetes, if you obviously you're stressed or pressured, your blood sugars fluctuate. So literally during the grand final, my blood sugars plummet to like super low, like I nearly went into a coma. And anyone who was in the audience, they would have seen it. It's like you got the Gfinity stuff running over of like sweets and like a drink of Coke and stuff for me to just take while I'm doing all of this. And basically I kept saying the same phrase because your mind doesn't work at that point. Like if you look into kind of hypos with diabetes, you're basically crashing, right? Just continuing to plummet. And that's where that meme started from. And I still have no idea how I made it through that best of three. And I'm so thankful to Sembler because like, obviously he's seeing this all go down. And obviously I'm not going to come out there. I'm like, I hate people that do that shit, right? Where they tweet and they're like, oh, I had this, it was really bad. And like, they're just looking for sympathy. Like I haven't got fucking time for that shit, man. I don't need that. So like, I didn't ever make a big deal out of it, but like, yeah, I was pretty much close to dying during the grand final. And it obviously I would never change the chance I got to do that. But that kind of led into then where I got fucked a bit during the whole Gfinity stuff as well.
Like, is that like that's obviously the follow-on question, isn't it? Since that meme was quite infamous at the time, did that actually affect your career in this regard? Like, were you trying to be a commentator and then people just associated that with you and thought that you were going to do every game like that or something?
I think, like, obviously at that point, I was commentating online with Pansy. I think this is even before she joined ESL. I was doing a lot of commentary stuff, and I think obviously people knew that wasn't my level, but that was such a big event, and it was like obviously. The way that event was a pretty infamous one for what Gfinity had to offer as well. So obviously so many more eyes on it. People looked at it and were like, oh, well, this guy's obviously trash. And I think the problem was, yes, Gfinity knew, but this was the time that they just about hired Red Ice. This was the event before they hired him. Right. And I'd actually been booked as a commentator for every single event that year with Gfinity because I'd done all the stuff. Like, it's actually quite funny because Richard and Henry started commentating together, but I actually got Henry into his first Gfinity when we were doing the online stuff. And this is going to blow your mind. Henry in like a fucking suit and tie and stuff like that. That was that was a long time ago. But like we'd all been booked basically for like the entire period. So for me, this was like, oh, okay, this is a chance to actually make some good money, be on big broadcasts and be a part of this early kind of CSGO stuff. But then Red Eye got involved, and even though there was contracts, even though there was things written up, I basically was given the ultimatum of you go and do interviews so I can hire who I want to hire for it. And I guess because he saw me do that grand final, he just made a decision of like, well, fuck his excuses, and I'm going to make sure that he can't commentate again, kind of thing. So that's kind of why I took like a step back from commentary on quite a big level, because it was like obviously a huge confidence knock as well. And I remember, I think it was me, you, and Scoots. We all sat down because I had an okay job in the real world as well. So I was working full time alongside it. And we were going through like all the pros and cons of it. And like you guys knew I couldn't fight it, but you guys also said that for the moment, just keep doing your full-time job and take the extra gigs that came along with it. And that's kind of what I did for a few years afterwards. But that was like a real rough point again, where you think like, is this really worth it?
Well, I mean, one thing that you touched on there, which is obviously, like, that's an interesting detail, is I noticed the people who actually know the industry aren't the ones who are like, yeah, give it all up, like, it'll work for everyone. Because, like, we know ourselves is touch and go sometimes, you know, and there's times in life where you have to take a step back. And crucially, one of the ways, I know eventually one day, hopefully, a lot of it will be very legit and everyone will get paid. But I tell people who are friends of mine who are like newer people in the industry, even to this day, I never in my mind think I have been paid any of the money till I know it's in my account. Like, that's even to this day. I mean, now it's a lot of paranoia. Sure, I've obviously been paid a lot of the last payments, but I just know what it was like in the days where if I'd have really thought that was money was going to be there in a certain month and then lived my life as if it had happened, you could get into a lot of trouble. So was it in light of the fact you say you were like contemplating at the time, like, should you go full time on this? Should you stick with what you had as well? Was this a concern for you?
Yeah, this was a massive concern because, like I said, right, I'm not exactly the most well-educated person. I come from a pretty shitty area, but I like moved out from my home with my parents when I was 17, and that's just like obviously just crazy stuff that went on when you're a kid. I'm very lucky with my family life that I have, but that felt like the best decision for me. And then this was the point where basically. This was after the Gfinity stuff happened. I'd been moved into interviewer role, which was like, I'm not going to complain about it, right? You're still on-screen talent, but it wasn't so what I wanted to do. It was more like, oh, you've just been pushed to the side. So I was lucky in a way that I still had the work given to me, but obviously it was a much in a much lesser capacity. But I basically, as I talked about earlier, from where I'm from, the friends I have and stuff, maybe not always the best type of people. And I ended up in a position where I had okay money from esports and I had good money from a normal job. And I just like, this is where I first realized I had my depression and anxiety, because this shit really got me. It was like, okay, I'm obviously not good enough. Like, so I tried to work on things, try to improve myself, but I kind of fucked my own head a little bit. And there was just some other factors of like stuff going on in the real world outside of esports. I was trying to basically work as a job as a manager and then do esports in the evening. So I think I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, didn't look after myself. It wasn't smart at all. And I basically had this point where a lot of my friends who sold drugs or were involved in that kind of stuff, they would just use my house as like an open place to chill. I had a lot of the people that I realized who weren't actually friends. They were just there for like money and stuff like that. And I was mixed up in a lot of drug stuff myself. And I just took a massive downhill spiral. And that's when I had to like actually go and get help, because I just didn't even leave the house. Like I didn't even turn up to things, didn't go to work and stuff like that. And like, it was all like one big thing that almost needed to happen to kind of show me that you can want this dream, you can want this job, but but maybe there's a time for it, right? Maybe it's not guaranteed just because I'd been here since the beginning, for example. Especially when I was watching like Pansy during this point, like I said, I was commentating with her. She got the offer from ESL. You saw Machine go from ESL UK to the German studios as well. And I'm looking around me thinking, well, wait a second, like I'm obviously not good enough at this point. What have I got to do?
And then actually a key aspect now, as we discuss this element, is one of the first jobs I remember you getting that was a big job was when you were able to go and work with the Unicorn guys. And they were famously one of the first sites where their gimmick, it's a good gimmick because obviously everyone now is going to have it, is they had an official license and they were a proper betting company. They weren't just some random skin site, like as you saw pop up, which were very in vogue at the time.
Yeah.
And so when you went to work with this company, this was an opportunity, right, to in theory go full time. But then the other aspect is you've got to give us an intro on this part, like you did before where you set up your life.
Yes.
As far as I know, this period when you then went and did the full-time aspect was also coinciding with when you were starting a real family, right?
Yeah, it was all at like one time. Yes, a lot higher. So I just left a really good job in property. I was one of the marketing managers there. And well, you know what like UK property market's like, it's very lucrative. So happy days there. My son was just about to be born. He was actually born just a few months before I joined Unicorn. And basically the offer that I was given from Unicorn was like life-changing offer. Like the money was really good. I could still freelance. The only downside was I had to move to Germany. I spoke to my missus at the time. We were discussing it. And for her, she was like, this is your dream. And this is obviously beneficial financially for us as a family. So for her, she was thinking this could be the thing that changes it, right? Because we still lived in a pretty bad area from where I was from. I definitely want to grow my kid up there. So for her, it was like, this gets him away from the bad people, the negative people he grew up with, and he gets to do his dream job. So we all marched on to Germany, and it was a long process as well, by the way. Like I'd met with their American team, spoke to the German guys there, sorting out the contracts and stuff. It was all done very properly at the start. And then it wasn't until I got there that things became incredibly messed up. But I did have a good period when we were creating a lot of content, which kind of put me to the forefront again. Because obviously I hadn't been on broadcast for a while. I'd only been doing little bits of esports stuff. I was more just like a very small-time streamer in that sense and just staying involved as wherever I could. But this was the one that could have really, well, in my eyes, could have projected it in a really positive fashion. And in many ways it did, because it put the eyes back on me in terms of what I was doing content-wise.
Well, I mean, as you just said there, like this is where you appear back on camera again. You were doing that like podcast with them, etc. There was a bunch of other content you were working with, and obviously the profile of the company was growing in esports. So this all sounds brilliant so far. Where's the hitch? What goes wrong? When does it take a dark turn?
Oh, mate, it took a dark turn basically when I got there, because we'd arrived in Germany. This guy, I'm just going to call him T, because I'm not going to give you his full name, obviously. I don't want to get fucked on any legal reasons, but he picks us up. We go for dinner. They take to a really fancy restaurant and stuff, big like showboating stuff, you know, that typical like loads of esports companies love to do. And these probably most of the brain dead ones when it comes to it, but they sit there and make it all seem amazing. We had like a temporary apartment while we looked for a proper apartment for us. They told me I was going to have like one woman who's dedicated, and I have all the logs and like all the stuff from the beginning of this, like dedicated to making sure you find someone that's suitable for you and your family and your son. And then this is where it started to become more of a problem, because this person, she was not just there to look after like helping us get settled. She was there for the entire company, and she was also doing finance and some other stuff. Right. And it was like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be hard. And if you think like having a pretty, Harvey was 6 or 7 months old at the time. And Gemma, yes, she's fine, was looking after him, but then trying to do all the other stuff in the country you're not familiar with, and then you're not actually getting the help that you've been told. So that was like my first gripe with them. But you know, when you're just new and you're thinking, oh, okay, like it will get better, right? We'll continue to sort of like you give them the benefit of the doubt kind of thing. So I was all hoping that, yes, we're going to get somewhere with it. And it actually took someone, you'll remember Petya, Foxy?
Yeah.
Yes, it took her.
She's someone who used to be, I think she was actually a female CS pro, wasn't she? She was from Bulgaria. she's in the within the esports space still. I think
she runs a
I
Twitch.
might be mistaken. Doesn't she also work with the Skiller project, right? The one where it was mixing male and female pros or something. So she is someone that we know within the industry at this point. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and she now works on Twitch as well, so she's doing all that kind of stuff. She's done good for herself, but she was at Unicorn at the time as well, and living in Berlin, and she was like basically the studio manager. So I was the one with the ideas and making the content, being the face of it. She was the one making sure all that happened and we got what we wanted. And the great thing about her is she doesn't allow bullshit to happen. Let's put it that way. She's very straight to the point and doesn't mess around. And that's kind of what I like with it. And she was actually the one that ended up helping me find the place when this other woman should have been doing it. And this is where like, it's definitely started to seem like there was promises that weren't going to be fulfilled as such. And it got more and more dodgy as like, so I was doing obviously a lot of events for them. We traveled to, I don't know, 10 events in 6 months or something like that. We were producing interviews. I was doing all the interviews. It was every day, you know, like the typical grind we had when we were doing content back years ago of you're the first one in at like 10 a.m. when the games go and you're the last one leaving, trying to edit your footage and stuff together. We had a very small team to do it, just 3 of us, but we made it work. We actually got a good amount of interviews that were getting like 50, 60,000 views and stuff like that. I did a long one with Semler as well. And obviously knowing some of you guys helped me be able to get these extra interviews, and knowing some of the players who have come up from like players who were at the very beginning of CSGO to where they are now, we were getting juicy content. But then the problem came is where I'll start by saying this, the American side of Unicorn, I have like 0 problems with. The problem was when they made the German side, they actually, and this is where the big scam starts coming, they called it Unistar. So it wasn't actually a part of Unicorn. And this is where it starts to become problematic, because that meant the US, yes, they had power, they had the money, but like ultimately Germany did what they wanted. But there was a lot of lies being said by this T character, who was basically the overall GM for all of us. Like he was the big boss. And what was happening was he was promising that we're going to do this. And you know, one of these kind of sales guys who can just talk so much, but never really deliver on it. Like just lying through everything. He was doing this to like multiple people within the company of saying, oh, we're going to run this event. So we'd be started working on projects with like, I don't know, a 100K budget, for example. And then he'd come to us a month or 2 later and be like, oh yeah, we have to scrap that now. It's not been approved. It's like, well, why did we work on it? And then we were getting pressured of like, oh, well, you're not creating as much content. You're not doing this side of things. So we're trying to come up with ideas of doing content on a smaller scale. And basically it got to the point where I, at this point, still didn't have like healthcare fully sorted in there as a diabetic, which is incredibly needed. Obviously I was on the road a lot with them. I was doing my freelance stuff as well. We were only just moving into the apartment where we actually stayed, like my actual family home, for example, rather than the one they picked for us. And then obviously the tax side of things, they were messing around with my tax because of me being a freelance. So I got less money.
I've heard, by the way, like, obviously I know myself a little bit from living in the Netherlands now, but I've heard actually that's one of the big problems when you move to another European country is basically because all the rules as to how you do things are so different. Well, what you normally need is someone local who knows how it works, you know, or you have to just hope through Google you can figure it out, you know. So every now and then you'll definitely, you know, you put your foot wrong or you'll find out something like is just accepted, like it's bureaucracy, takes a million pages of paperwork, or, you know, were you running into these issues?
A lot of these issues, because obviously doing the freelance stuff as well. And like I was trying to get it paid into my UK account to like duck it. Obviously that wasn't smart. That's not the way you should do things at all. But basically at this point, all the help they said they were going to give on these things just never came through. So then we realized we were doing stuff. And then what this caused was, because I was obviously working all day, going to events when they were sending me, and then trying to make extra money now because I wasn't getting the salary I thought I was going to get. So I obviously was very low on money at this point. I was just grinding. And then I've got my missus at home with a newborn baby who obviously wants the dad to be around as well. So like I was again stuck in a situation where I'm burning the candles at both ends and I can't even now support my family. And there was another clause that was put in there, like basically, oh, well, if things didn't work out after a few months, like after, I think it was after a year, then we would still send you back to the UK. We'd cover it all. We'd pay for it all. Well, obviously I did go back, but my missus and my son went back before me because I had to deal with all the shit in Germany and nothing was ever paid. I'm still owed a ton of money. And like, I ended up losing, at the time she was my fiance, but I ended up losing the relationship, made things really bloody awkward. And then I just again took a massive spiral, like in the wrong direction. But I was left in a country with the only friends I had were people I'd worked with, and there was no one else really around. And as I said, I don't come from a family where someone's going to come with a nice like check and just bail you out for a little bit. That was just not an option. So the only option I had was to try and pull myself together and start grinding again on getting the events and that kind of thing. But basically it turned into a whole string of lies from Unicorn, to the point where I basically told them that I'm leaving. I'm not putting up with this stuff anymore. And like, well, you'll know me from events. I'm not like an aggressive person. And I think I've tweeted stuff before of like, I don't want to just be like a product of my environment, of where I'm from. I want to be better than kind of everything I know as such. But there was a point where I'd nearly lost it there, and I'd probably be in jail or some crazy shit right now, because I'd lost my family, I'd lost my fiance, and then I had no money and no escape. And this company had basically like closed its doors on me. I was speaking to Rahul and Carl, who are like the two owners of the company in America, and there was nothing they could do, right? And then the moment I entered, like I spoke to Richard about it, the moment I looked about getting like legal help and stuff like that, it was just such a messy situation, because Germany is a baffling country when it comes to laws. It's so different to anything like you were saying that we're used to, that even trying to fight it on the level I was, they had more power, because actually, this is a crazy thing, right? So I'd use my own lawyer and had someone check the contract, half in German, half in English, signed it, all done. And then they want me to sign a copy when I got there face to face. So obviously I said, okay, I'm not going to sign anything else without it being checked. So I had it checked again. But what they'd done is put a copy in front of me where the German stuff was different to what was actually put in the English stuff.
Right.
So at this point, then I'm really screwed. And then they were going to potentially. So basically, I luckily got a few gigs with ESL and StarLadder, and one was for a company that also had another betting company as a sponsor. And I was just like hosting the desk or commentating, whatever. And then they tried to threaten like to sue me and stuff over that. And at this point, I'm just trying to like hold everything together, right? Trying to pull things together and try and keep my actual life afloat again. And I'm thinking, this, like, you know, when something seems too good to be true, I should have just walked away at the very beginning. Because yes, it's been good for my career now, and I've semi come out the other end. I'm doing good, but it's like, this cost me so much. I mean, it literally cost me everything. I basically had to rebuild from scratch.
And then there's another element, obviously, composed of this, which people might be aware that your son has his own health concerns, and then this basically arose during all this shit going down and sort of spiraling with Unicorn, right?
Yeah, so basically he had a heart born prematurely, so he wasn't exactly fully strong, well in himself, and he was supposed to go in and actually have an operation. But by this point, my healthcare had been cancelled, and he wasn't included for that healthcare either. So we turned up, this is before obviously they'd left, we turned up at the doctors, went to go for the operation. They basically said, no, we can't have it done. So that's when I flew them both back to the UK. Obviously I had to stay in Germany to deal with stuff and to continue trying to fix everything. And they obviously got the treatment in UK. That's never a problem, right? That will get sorted. But that's when that's the point where I was saying about that I lost it, because at this point you're not affecting me anymore, right? You're affecting someone who literally has no other choice. And that's another thing that's messed up when it comes to like the German healthcare. Yes, you have to pay for it, but I mean, the fact they were willing to just turn down a kid who's like just over a year old who needs an operation to look at his heart, it's like, yeah, that was it. That was like the tipping point for me. That was why I knew this was all going to go badly. And that's obviously after they'd gone back, my ex and my son, they never came back to Germany, and I was then on my own.
So as you go from this, as you said, you got a few other gigs elsewhere. Yeah. Like in this story, as you said, basically, if you knew up to this point, actually the best approach would have been, like you said, just walk away earlier, skip this last part. The last part sucked. That was the worst part of the story. But actually, and this is unfortunately, this is one of those things where you worry about telling newer people in the industry, because unfortunately, I have to say, that old like cliche of like, you know, it's darkest before the dawn breaks or whatever, it's kind of true. Like usually after the shittest period is where the awesome period comes. That's what keeps you going. So how did you then get from there to the good place where things are going well?
I guess really like I owe it a lot. So Richard me and him were just talking, texting back and forth and stuff. And he was trying to make sure that like, obviously I was talking to the right people or just being in touch with the right people to help me throughout all of this. But I basically just decided that I'm not going to take my antidepressants and stuff anymore. I was just going to go to the gym. I was going to try and get myself back into shape. And I was just going to do anything I could. So I reached out to ESL. I spoke to Joe. He put me in touch with someone who was doing the online events. I went back and did some commentary. And I mean, this is like commentary at like 3-4 in the morning, doing like South American qualifiers and stuff, like anything basically. Then Tom Biz, he's one of the CSGO commentators, good friend of mine. He was living in Ukraine working for StarLadder at the time. And I'd spoken to him. I got in touch with him I used to commentate some online stuff with him. And I was like, is there anything going? He's like, oh, you might actually be able to get a shot at a very small, like it was called the GG Bet something. I don't know, like one of these ones.
One of those ones,
right? One of those small ones. And I got to do the desk. It was my first time hosting a desk for StarLadder. And obviously it was really small, but that was like, put me back kind of on the map. So then Joe Miller then reached out and asked like, oh, do you want to do a bit of hosting here? Do you want to do some? And it all just really, it was so crazy, right? Obviously, this is where I said the unicorn bit helps me because I'd been on all that content and the content was getting good numbers. It was doing the rounds on Reddit. But then it was literally like, I thought this was it. I thought I'm going to have to go back to the UK after I've made some money and then just go back and work a terrible 9 to 5 again and be almost borderline unhappy with everything because it's just not what I wanted to do, right? But then I just got all these offers and they kept coming in. And like you said, that money doesn't come quick, right? So you can't rely on it until it's in your bank account. And some companies take 3 months, some companies take 30 days, some companies take 6 months to pay it. So it's like, Jesus Christ, how am I going to hold and be able to do all this? But it was just a crazy knock-on effect. And I don't think I really look up to like Machine as an example. For me, Machine is probably the best host we have in terms of not just Counter-Strike, but in general esports. He's very smooth at what he does. But I'm looking at a lot of these guys. I'm looking at like the work they're putting out. I'm looking at like some of the League of Legends people, what they do on the desk. And I'm thinking, okay, can I just give this a shot? And I did, and I kept going. And obviously I'm still trying to get better. But my focus was not so much on getting the work, but it was just like, I'll do anything that's going to give me money because I had no money. I had no way of getting out of Germany. I was being screwed over by their tax department. And then I'm also trying to send money to my ex, so she has money for my son as well. Because obviously they're then going through hell back home of we had gone from renting a property there to not having it and things like that. She's then back in with like her parents and things, and it's just all gone crazy. But I just got extremely lucky where I think I got the Pro League season from ESL. I got multiple StarLadder events of doing the hosting from like obviously the GG Bet, then even to the bigger ones that we did. And it just got crazy. I even then got a load of stuff for Street Fighter and Capcom. And there was just a crazy knock-on effect. And I just felt so lucky that, okay, people are seeming to like this. And my full focus just like do as many events as possible. And now I've ended up to where I am here. And I tweeted about, I don't know, a week ago or so, but I now owe no money. Like when I left Germany, I owed 15,000 euros or so. And that was without even the tax. That was just to get my stuff shipped back to the UK. Because it wasn't like I could just ditch all the stuff I had there. Like I'd taken my life, my computers, like my clothes, everything, like my beds, whatever. I brought it all to Germany. So I shipped it all back, paid friends back. I did everything I could to like get back onto the even kill. But it's only just now, a year and a half later, that's all cleared off. But it's a good feeling to come round and out of it. Because at the time, especially with the whole unicorn thing, I just didn't think there was ever going to be an end to it, or otherwise I just disappear.
If that had have been where you'd have moved back to the UK, you hadn't got these little gigs and whatever, you have to go back to a real life job and do something similar before, would that have like soured the esports experience? Like, were you ever anyone where you were looking for like a big payoff, like for things to go awesome? Would you still have been cool with what you'd done in esports? Where would you have been at, do you think?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think I was never satisfied what I did at the beginning. I think I became more satisfied with my work at Unicorn, funny enough, in terms of just the interviews, because I was given so much freedom. Like, obviously, you were one of the people that would teach me when you were the editor-in-chief at SK. We worked alongside each other back and then doing that stuff. I learned from a lot of great people. I worked with Richard closely, but I always saw myself as like, obviously being a bit younger, that I had a lot more to give or a lot more to offer. And I felt like Unicorn gave me the chance to do that. So I think if it all ended there, it would have been soured by the ending of how it did. But at least with my contribution to what I did to esports, like everything from my time in Korea when I was managing the Korean StarCraft team, when I was just doing content in general, what I did to Zowie, which the guys who still work there now, they still message me. They're still happy to see me. We saw them in China when we did the Star Ladder event, right? I think I could still be happy, but I don't think I'd be fulfilled. I think that's the main thing, where definitely now it's great to not be worried about the money. I don't have to accept every single gig that's offered to me. And I can now work on me a bit more. Like I won't see like I'm going to go and be the best in Counter-Strike, for example, or something like that, because we have so many great, talented people. But I believe I can now continue to work on myself with that big stress taken off me. And I want to see how far I can push it now. And the fact I obviously don't really have a life. I just watch and follow so many different games as well. I just want to keep on working on my craft now.
What do you actually think of that element then, actually having this position with the industry? Like you say, you even have actually some interesting choices as to which games you work in, what events. It's like you just stuck to the one game. So what is that element like for someone who was once just a fan, just watching? And I mean, I always tell people this, it wasn't even that long ago, like they invented stuff like analyst desks. We didn't even used to have them. It was just the commentators, wasn't it?
It was just you and Joe.
You know, unless you basically thought you were going to be the next Joe Miller or Red Eye, most of us never would be on camera in that respect. So what is it like to be in this position now?
Oh, it's such a blessing. Like I'm not anywhere near as big as what people are and stuff like that. But like, it's just so cool to be able to sit there and say like, this is where we've come to. Because like you were saying there, right, there would just be two commentators. And quite often at events, those commentators would still be like remote in areas, right? We wouldn't even have the thought of a desk and stuff or having the extra interviews done. If they were interviews, they'd be really awkward. I feel like now it's like we're kind of in a position where there is so much going around, but it's still, I don't think people should rest. Like you see people make decisions where they just stick to one game, for example. Well, look what happened with some of the Blizzard guys when, was it Heroes of the Storm died off?
Yes. Yeah.
They can't find, and some of these guys are really talented. I've watched these broadcasts before. It's a good show, right? It's a good product in that sense, regardless of what you think of Blizzard. But like, these people now, they don't have anywhere else to go, and that's the worrying side. I guess that's maybe why I spread myself across multiple games. Like Counter-Strike, we know will last; it'll be there. But again, eventually, unless another one comes along, there might be an end to that.
Sure.
But like, I've tried to make sure now that I'm doing the games I'm passionate about. Like that's the focus. Because like I said, over the last year and a half was all about just doing what was going to get me money, right? Doing what would get me paid. And I think if you have a passion for it, then that's going to drive you on further to be better and do better in that sense. One thing I think is my biggest like criticism on myself at the moment is, like I said, I had the depression. I suffer from anxiety. I literally can't step on a stage. Like I think it was Scoots that came out about this. This was during a Gfinity, and he actually tweeted messaged me about like how much I was sweating during one of the events. And like, he was just reaming me out about it. It's like in a jokey way. I probably looked like I'd been doing like, I don't know, laps around a field or something, but it was all part of my anxiety and the pressure of going on stage. I literally just sweat so much from everywhere. And then I found CBD oil. I use that kind of stuff at the moment. I talk very positively and proactively about it, but obviously if someone's going to use it, do your research on it. But that stuff has been like life-changing for me to be calmer and to actually focus on my job a bit more rather than worried about what's going on with your body. It allows me to concentrate further. But I still get in my own head about things of like, oh, why didn't I get picked for this event, right? Or like, I was doing this event for last year for these. Sure. Why have they not done that? Even with like people, like obviously a lot of people I speak to quite regularly is like Chad, for example. Me and Henry have always been really cool. You and Richard and stuff. Scoots I still speak to a lot. He's been very helpful, especially in like how I should voice myself in at times to try and be smarter with it. But like, there is some people that I used to be really close to, and like they've gone on to do great things now. We were I would say we were friends and everything like that, and then you just don't hear from them anymore. You don't speak to them anymore. And I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what the hell have I done, or what could have been done? Because my anxiety kicks in so massively. And then you see these people again at the event, and everything's fine, everything's normal, and you just think, why the hell am I letting this just completely wreck my life on a daily basis? So again, coming back to the fitness thing, I use the CBD oil. I'm trying to stay in shape and keep myself going a lot. But there's just so much that this industry does because of like, there is only so much opportunity, right? So I can't even guarantee now that I'm going to be until the rest of the year. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get the majors, if that would even be an opportunity. If I get the minors, you can't really guarantee anything. And that's one of the scary parts of it. I think if anyone's wanting to come into the industry, is try and keep a good balance at first. And then if something does take off, obviously check as much as you can. But I think that's another thing with Unicorn is we said about obviously where I started in kind of esports years and years ago. I thought that by this point, I know the red lights, I know the warning signs. Right. I'm not going to get caught by this. And now it makes me like nervous before I sign up to things. Like I did an event with the company Supernova Quickfire in Malta, and I'd never worked with them before. They're a brand new company to it. And even then in my mind, and by the way, these guys are amazing. They paid very fast. They're really cool people to do an event with. But I mean, it's your first event doing it. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, am I going to get paid? Is this going to happen? Because like, you know, of a lot of these events, there's no contracts or anything like that.
Sure. Well, okay, another aspect as well then is when you said there about like, obviously, I think something that a lot of people can relate to is anxiety over what events will I get.
Yeah.
You know, for example, if I work with this company, will they hire me again next time? Is this other company I haven't worked with yet going to hire me? That is obviously a concern in theory for everyone who's freelance talent. Yeah. But I notice it particularly seems to plague the people who are on the come up, the ones who haven't like fully made it, as it were, not as established. And one of the areas I find that this is a bit depressing, I have to say, from being at events with some of those people is a lot of them do have that mentality where it's like they have like what you'd call like a scarcity mindset, where as a result, if someone who's their mate, it could literally be their mate in the industry, succeeds, they're thinking, why wasn't that me? Or like, you know, is he taking my job from it? And they get paranoid in that way. And so unfortunately, I've made tweets about this before. It's not actually even tier 1 that's as bad. It's mainly like the tier 2 people where there's a lot of backbiting. And like, even though on one level they are friends, they are colleagues, they all work together, that can be a rough scene in terms of like, you know, the relationship angle itself, right?
Yeah, and do you know what? When you're saying that, I can be honest about this. I got hired for the E-League minors. Was that what, 2016, 17 maybe? I'm trying to think. Something around then.
Was it for?
The first E-League major.
Oh, that'd be 2016 then, yeah, because the event itself was beginning 2017, yeah.
And this was, again, I was at Unicorn at this time. We were having all this fallout. Obviously, at this point, I was single. I'd been left. I'd lost my son and everything. And I did one of probably the worst things I could have done. I remember acting like some big egotistical cunt to a good friend of mine, Jackie. You probably know him as well, a commentator.
UK commentator, yeah.
Yeah, and me and him, by the way, have done so many events together, always been really good friends, like from years ago. And I was in a bad place regardless, but he was a close friend, and I treated him like pure shit during that event, just because I was almost worried about what he could do, right? And I'd screwed my own head over. So what you just said there is very, very true. And the worst thing you can do, right, is push people who are long friends away from you by doing stuff like that. Like, that's one thing I think over the last year, especially since I've got better in myself, is learned that the whole ego thing is irrelevant. Like, you can be literally no one and get given a shot, but that shot can be taken away from you the very next day. And I think for me now, the way I look at events is, I don't care. Like, for example, Stunner, right? He's gone from doing interviews, which helped me creep up to go and do interviews, because he's now hosting more, as an example. And Machine's obviously gone back to commentary. So all this stuff in a circle benefited me. That was that New York event we did together. That's where that all changed, right? And that gave me a chance to get a lot more of the events and exposure in it. But like, even now, Stunner also hosts, I host, Machine hosts. They are both two hosts that are far better than me. But never in my mind do I sit there and think, well, I should have this job, or I should be. And I think it's having that perspective now, which I didn't have back then, but I definitely was. I definitely done some of what you were just saying about then. And I think to Jackie in particular, that was really bad, because we were such good friends. Like, we'd party together, hang together, do events together, all that kind of thing. So yeah, that was a bit of that rejigged some of my emotions. Stuff.
Well, and then another aspect along those lines is, when you look at your position in the industry now, one of the things I often say to the people who were around in the old days is it's not even necessarily about your like pure skill set now. Like you might be doing a job that you never done before, but the point is the one thing that all of us have that the new people don't have, no matter how talented they are, is they don't have the experience. So they haven't seen what it was like, and they don't know how bad things can get, how good things are. They don't know some of the things that are developed over the years. Sometimes they don't even know the people. Like, for example, some of the people we've referenced in this conversation, people can see, I'm sure who are listening, how beneficial it was to know someone like Joe Miller or to Richard or something way before they were in position now where they could help you. You know, you needed to already know these people. So, like, what do you think your position is at the moment in industry? Like, do you think this is the sort of job that's the right job for you? Is this the sort of thing you want to do long term and go forwards and be known as a host in whichever game it might be?
Yeah.
What's kind of like, with your experience in mind, where do you see it going?
So like how I've looked at it over the past 6 months, again, as I told you, I've been doing a hell of a lot of reflection on this. I'm 29 now, I'm getting older, I have to think a bit more logically. I definitely want to give the hosting thing more of a push. Like this is where I want to stay for the meantime. I love doing interviews, and I think that just comes from the kind of journalist side of things, because what I love to do is ask the questions I wanted to ask as a fan. So I try to put myself in that perspective. And my focus when I do interviews on broadcast, even though like, you know, with ESL and when we do Starland and stuff, we have to have a short time frame. You can only ask a few questions. My focus is purely on sod all these stupid, like, how are you? How does it feel? Bullshit. I just want to see what value I can provide to the stream. So if I can give a fan who's thinking, well, why did he make this decision? Or what's his reason for using this weapon? Like when the org came out, I asked OllieJ about it, and he literally broke down the weapon like stat by stat, and it was like crazy. But that gave so many people something to talk about, and I think that's my focus on the interview side of things. I love doing that, but hosting is definitely, I feel a lot more confident doing it at the moment. I'm certainly learning. You helped me massively in China as well with some things. A lot of people have been really helpful in terms of just becoming a better host. But I think ultimately is I'll do this for as long as I can until I see that maybe, I don't know, it doesn't entertain me anymore. Because that's the thing, as I said, about I want to be passionate about it. Like if I don't want to do something, then I'm not going to give it my full 100% attention. Like I think that's what happens to some people with commentary as well, is they start commentating, they're really good, they get to a point, but then it just becomes like the same old rinse and repeat almost, and they're not working on themselves. So I think as long as I'm willing to work on myself, I want to improve, then that's hosting is definitely something I want to continue with. But I've always, I guess, I looked at the kind of the end goal is that wherever this ends up going, as it gets more popular, like I do some stuff with Jinx, who are kind of owned by Sky TV. And like they come up with show ideas and stuff, they expand more. I guess as we get older, it's looking at, could it be something where I can have like a job where I travel less, for example, as my son gets older? And I guess like Anders, right? He's definitely traveled a lot less over the past year or so for I can only assume would be a reason like his family. And so I guess that's a decision I'll make when it comes down to it. But like for now, I've got a good balance. I try to see my son as much as possible. And I enjoy the hosting stuff. I just hope that I can continue now. I don't have to worry about money, that I can focus on actually, okay, how do I improve? How do I become as good as Machine or as like to that level and be the best host I can be for these broadcasts and games? And PUBG's been amazing in that sense, is I've got a lot of PUBG work over the past, well, since the beginning of this year, really. And although, yes, some people maybe not like the game or whatever else like that, it's given me a chance to really grow and learn a new game for the first time in quite a while, because all the other games I'd done were like games I'd known for a longest time or I'd actively followed, for example.
Right. See if you can do this. It's going to be a tricky task, okay? But what you need to do is give like something of a summary of the bad parts of esports that you experience, like, you know, what the negatives are, what the problems can be, the things that can ruin your life, as you attested to. But if you can also somehow weave in, what are some of the positives? Like, what are the things that make it worth keeping going? What were the things that made you not want to quit? Like, if you can summarize both parts so that we're not being too biased one way or the other.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, let me start with the bad, because that's the easiest one. Obviously, the bad parts is if you fall in with the wrong people, in terms of like you sign with the wrong company or the wrong sponsor or the wrong organization if you're a player, and you didn't read a contract, right? You got the whole Tfue thing going on at the moment with FaZe. There's many things where people will try and exploit you. You get it even now today. I get emails that say like, "Oh, we want to use this. Would you do it for free, for example?" And it would take you this time, blah blah blah. And even unless it's for like a charity or something really nice, there's a lot of companies that will just like want to get your input, get your info, and give nothing back for it, yet it massively benefits them. Obviously, the other bad things is like some of the kind of, I think there's definitely a lack of care for some tournament organizers. Like there's none in particular, but just on like health. Like one thing I realized with VSL, there was one time where my son was rushed to hospital, literally the day I flew, and they just rebooked my flight. So the next day I came in a bit later. Things were actually, we sorted out. Obviously, he was still needing care, but it wasn't as full on at that point. But like, I think there needs to become a bit of like, yes, we're freelancers, but you care more about like the people as well, because we're only just starting to get desks where they have more than just 2 analysts and 1 host. We're getting events where it gets a bit more split, so people can actually have time off, because it's very draining doing all the traveling and that side of things. Trying to think of anything else bad throughout all of it. I guess like the failed promises and stuff like that. We've had that at the very beginning. It was right. Because everyone would try and promise something, and then actually maybe what they were promised didn't happen. Doesn't necessarily make them a bad person, but it ended up they were the bad person. Then going on to the like, say, for example, now if someone promises something and it doesn't deliver or you don't get paid for it, then that's normally because like they just never had any intentions in the first place. That's why you have to be careful on the contracts and that side of things. I guess on the good side of things, and probably the only reason I'm still here is a lot of the people, right? There's a lot of people that I'm still friends with, I still talk to now, who are active, who are still here, who have been on this grind, on this journey. I also find actually one of the things for me, I don't know if it works in the same way for you, Duncan, but when I'm working with some of these younger commentators, like your Harry, your Hugo, they give me that little bit of a buzz when they get excited about things or they get really into it. That makes me like excited as well. I don't know if it's a weird way of saying that, but like they
reignite your passion or whatever.
Yeah, in some ways they definitely do. It was wild because obviously I was doing loads of events and it was doing it with like you, Chad, Machine, everyone, they love the games. We're all watching it. Everyone's having a fantastic time. But when you get that bit of freshness that comes in, you go, oh, whoa, okay, this is this again. And that was really nice. That helped spur me on. So that was a positive. So a lot of the people, like, I think if you're around, and I guess that's one thing that went through my mind during the bad bouts of anxiety was like, well, wait a second, maybe I'm just a shit person to be around. Like maybe people don't want to be around me. But I think you have to enjoy who you're working with. And I'm very lucky in both Counter-Strike and PUBG that the people I work with are really cool, very fun, and you have a good balance, right, in and out of work and when you're on camera or not, which gives us, like, I would hate to be on some broadcast where I see it and you're like, yes, there is no chemistry here. There is nothing like that. Some of the other good bits, the reason I stayed was obviously like, what other job really do you get to travel so much with and experience so much of the world? Like, admittedly, we don't get to see that much of the places we're from, but we're now in a position where we can book an extra day somewhere, right? Or stay for a bit longer and actually enjoy it and see it some more. That's one thing. Like I said, you think where I come from, family holidays were just in the UK. That was it. You'd never travel abroad. So I'd not really been abroad maybe once or twice prior to esports. And now I've been over most of the world. Like that on its own was amazing and worth it. The money's certainly getting a lot better, depending obviously what level you're at. So it can now be a thing where you can say this is a full-time job. Like I can now do this, support myself, I live okay, and I can support my family as well, which to me is amazing because there was a point where I thought maybe that would never happen. Maybe you would have to just go and do a part-time or work a full-time job to make that possible. And I'd say some of the other benefits is just like when you're meeting fans, like I know some fans are crazy, but like some people, when you can sit, I sat in a crowd before and it was, I think it was ESL Pro League finals. This kid was like 8 or 9 years old with his dad watching, and he was having a better conversation about Counter than like what most fans can on Reddit, for example. This dude, he was, and it was really nice because he liked the time that we were taking to talk to him, but like it was actually enjoyable to talk to him as well because he had so much knowledge for a young kid. And I guess we'll see that trend more, right, as this industry grows and more people are just growing up with it being around them. I don't know, did that sum up both of them well enough?
I think we got a lot in there. Right, at the end of the interview then, what would like your final message be, or do you want to thank anyone in particular or shout someone out?
Well, to start with for you in the first place, because you were definitely used to give me a hard time back on the SK gaming stuff, because if no one remembered all the way back then, but Duncan was putting out non-stop work. Like you were putting out crazy amounts of videos when it wasn't as easy as it is now, right? In terms of setting up and filming, doing all the stuff, getting players. But yeah, you helped me massively on the journalistic side of things. Even Carmack, because he was there before you, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and I still have one of Carmack's original like journalist document things that he gave and sent out to us. Obviously, I have to thank Heaton and Spawn, because without them guys, I probably would have never got this far. Like, if it wasn't for Zowie, I wouldn't be here right now, because that was probably the point where I'd be like, I'm finishing college, I'll go get a job and just chill and do normal stuff. But they gave me so much of an opportunity. Like, they were the first people to put me in front of a camera and stuff like that. Richard as well, just because he's always, well, you know, Richard, like, he doesn't fuck around. So the words are honest, the words are truth. Scoots has got to be in there at the same time, because he kind of directs me on the like how I should maybe smartly do some of these things rather than be as brash and outspoken on it. And I guess as well, like a lot of the people in my family who support all this, because obviously it's been a crazy couple of years, like, and all the bad shit happening. So yeah, maybe they'll watch this, maybe they won't. I'll probably show them it. It's kind of a general thing I should do. And hopefully this helps people out there who want to get involved in the industry, and it doesn't just sugarcoat it on all the nice stuff that can happen, right? Hopefully this has been something where we've shared a story, or a few stories, which have shown the whole journey and how it isn't just as easy as like, oh, we're at the very top now, this is all perfect. Like there's a bit more to it. And I guess just finally, thank you to everyone that actually enjoys what we do and gives the constructive feedback. Obviously, you know it. We get plenty of morons that tweet us on a regular basis, but we also get a fair few people that will come in and say the nice things or give valuable feedback. And I hope I can just continue to improve and be the best at what I'm doing, at least for me, and continue to improve and provide enjoyment, provide what people want to see.
This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Butt Pounder 420, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Wendelful, Chi Mao, JDubs, Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Daniel Olivar, NateDOhDoubleG, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks go out to Jerky's Minion and weixz. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want teasers for my upcoming content? See who the guests are. Maybe you'd like to take part in a donator discussion with me on video. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at link in the description box below.